funny time of year for me. I don't know if this is the same for you, but this past weekend, I did two things that are kind of at odds with each other. I bought snow sleds for my children, which means it won't snow this year. I think I posted that if you follow me on Twitter or something. I pretty much jinxed us all. And for those of you who have to shovel driveways, then you're thanking me for that. For those of you who are kids at heart, you're pretty irritated by that. But then in the same weekend that I bought snow sleds, I also was looking up information for lawn care and lawn maintenance. Because we have to worry about that, unfortunately. Like, we moved into our house a little over a year ago, and the grass is quite horrendous, if you want to call it grass. It's pretty much just weeds with a piece or two of sod here and there. But you have to worry about that stuff at this time of year, because if you don't, then it's just going to be more weeds when it starts to get warmer. And so I found this just crazy, complex thing going on in my weekend, and just frustrated me beyond belief. But then it started getting me more frustrated, because then I started thinking about cutting the grass. And as I told you last week, I'm a little OCD, or CDO, as I like to say it. But as I cut the grass, and I don't have great grass now, but in Georgia we had Bermuda. Has anybody had Bermuda front yards before? I loved it because you can do stuff. I pretended it was a baseball field, pretty much, every time I cut the grass. It was our first home. When we lived in Atlanta, we had Bermuda, and it was our first home that we had purchased. And my dad gave me my first lawnmower, and it was Briggs & Stratton, and whatever, his push lawnmower. But I decided that I was going to have designs in my lawn. Okay, and I'm a little weird that way, but all guys think about it. Some of us just act on it. And so I would cut it one week. I'd cut it this way, and one week I'd cut it that way. And then one week I decided to do the plaid checkered pattern. So I cut it diagonally one way, and then I cut it diagonally the other way, which is fun until your alignment gets off. And it doesn't happen in the front or the back. It happens in the middle every time. So what do you do when that happens? You start over. I did. I had to completely restart. That's just kind of how twisted I am. But that's the thing about, like, when things are out of alignment and you kind of get messed up. I remember hearing one time, anybody spent time on a farm? I'm not a farmer. I'm a city boy. But when you're plowing the field, yeah, we got the Gustins. We love their farm. When you're plowing a field, like, the lines are supposed to be in rows, so vegetation and weeds, or I don't know, something about growing. But I heard one time that when you plow a field, and when you're plowing like huge plots of land, that you're not supposed to look down at the line, but you're supposed to pick a point off in the distance and kind of plow to that spot. Is that inaccurate at all? Maybe? Okay, we're going to pretend it is. But what happens is when you get off of alignment, you just completely messes up your whole deal. And it happens more than just farming, more than just cutting the grass. How about our cars? When you've got a wheel out of alignment, it not only can it frustrate you because one arm gets stronger than the other because it's just holding the wheel at this angle at all the times, but it actually is bad for our tires. My Explorer, or as I like to call it, the Exploder, it had this problem where it was wearing the outside of the tires only, but not the inside of the tires, and I didn't know why. I just thought, I didn't really care. They were tires and they were working until the guy told me, well, they're going to work until they don't, and then you're going to be in trouble. And so he was telling me about the alignment of the truck and how important it was, so that there's even wear on the tires, and it causes the joints and all these things inside the truck that I have no idea how they work, but it can cause stress on them and break something in there. And it started me thinking about how important that alignment is. And alignment is kind of a buzzword in business culture, and especially in church culture these days. It talks about the alignment of staff, the alignment of people, groups of people. And that, I think, is possibly the most frustrating and potentially most difficult thing to align, is people. And if you don't believe me, just think back to a couple of months ago at Thanksgiving or Christmas. Everybody's there for the same reason. They have to be. Right? Some of them want to be, but everybody's there because they have to be. And we're all there for the right purpose. Like, we're here for Thanksgiving, or we're here for Christmas, or we're here for a birthday, or we're here for this thing or that thing. So whenever people are together for a common purpose, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're aligned. Some people are there with different ideas of what it should be. Some have different ideas on how the buffet should be set up, where the meat should be in relationship to the potatoes, where the paper plate should be, or what kind of plate should we use. And so there's all these different opinions and all these different ideas on what should happen, even though the people are there for a singular common purpose. And that's where the alignment gets out of whack. And we've been in this series, and if you're just joining us, this is your first Sunday here, you're kind of coming in at the end of the movie. We have one more week after this in this series called Rock the City. We've been studying the book of Nehemiah, my favorite book of the Bible, which I feel a little guilty of because Jesus isn't in that story by name. But it is. It's my favorite story in the scriptures because there's no miracle that happens in the book of Nehemiah. I don't identify with miracles because I've never been able to produce a miracle. Well, I do have 3 beautiful children and 1 more on the way. That's pretty miraculous. If you know me in high school, you'd really think that was miraculous. And some of you did know me in high school. But in Nehemiah, there's no miracle. And so just to catch you up really quickly, Nehemiah, born in exile, he was a Hebrew, he was an Israelite. He had a burden on his heart to see his city rebuilt, specifically to see the walls of Jerusalem rebuilt. They'd been taken over by 2 or 3 kingdoms in the area, and they were in shambles. It was just, there was no structure, there was no safety for the people of Israel, for the people of Judah, the people of Jerusalem, and he was broken-hearted over this. And he actually was a cupbearer to the Persian king Artaxerxes. And he was upset about this situation one day, and Artaxerxes said, well, what's wrong with you? And he told him what's wrong, and Artaxerxes agreed to help him go back to Jerusalem and rebuild the walls. And so what we've been looking at for the last couple of weeks is the process that he's been through. And last week, we talked about this specific scene, one of my favorite scenes in Nehemiah, when the enemies of Jerusalem, the enemies of Nehemiah, were threatening him, and they were actually gathering to attack to stop the rebuilding of Jerusalem, because everyone knew, and we still know today, that Jerusalem and Israel as a whole tends to be kind of this important piece of land. Not just religiously, but politically, financially. This is an important area of our globe. And back in Nehemiah's time, way back when, it was equally as important. It was equally a source of conflict. And so the importance of this area, everyone knew. And if Jerusalem was rebuilt, and the walls were rebuilt, then there was going to be some structure, there was going to be some stability that the people who were enjoying the lack of structure, the lack of safety, that were kind of coming in and doing as they like, they didn't want to see that happen. So these enemies of Jerusalem were gathering, the armies were building, and Nehemiah hears about it, and the people hear about it, and they're getting scared. So Nehemiah brings the leaders and the nobles, and he takes their families, he takes their children, he takes their wives, and he puts them in the low parts of the wall, out in the exposed area, and he challenges them to continue working. Not just to build a wall, but to fight for their families, to fight for their brothers, to fight for their sisters, their sons, and their daughters. And Nehemiah, the book of Nehemiah tells us, this is kind of his journal, this book of Scripture. It's kind of his journal this whole period of time. He tells us that the work continued, and the workers would work with one hand, and they'd have a sword in the other. They'd have their weapon in the other. As a matter of fact, he goes on to tell us that half of his staff, his personal staff, stood guard while the work was continuing on the wall. So that's what has been going on. They built the wall halfway. The threat of danger is here. They kind of respond to it, and they keep working. You think we're all good, right? Kind of that unity that happens when you or your family or your friends kind of encounter something that's difficult. That bond that happens, like, we're going to get through this. We're going to help each other. We're going to be there for each other. When there's a threat or there's something difficult going on, like it was for the people of Jerusalem, the threat of danger, you tend to kind of get together and unify. And that happened for a moment. But like many things in life, what happened next was that the people in leadership started to kind of abuse their power. They started to claim certain laws or certain activities or certain structures of life, and they kind of overstep their bounds. They push it to the limit. And if you want to turn, we're going to be in Hebrews chapter 5, we're going to be in Nehemiah chapter 5. I totally switched the series on you in the middle. Nehemiah chapter 5, and if you're not familiar with the Bible, just go to the table of contents, turn there. Nehemiah is before Psalms and Proverbs. It's a great book. I encourage you to read it on your own time. But what was happening here in Nehemiah chapter 5 is the people they essentially were selling their own fellow Hebrew into slavery. They had gotten some stability now, the work had continued, and their position had kind of been solidified. And so they start using the situation to their benefit. As a matter of fact, Nehemiah and his people had gone and purchased back Israelite people from slavery so they could reestablish their people in this city. They were lending people money so they could buy grain. They could have the things they needed. And Nehemiah hears about the nobles, the officials, the leaders of these people starting to sell their own people for their own gain. And this book tells us that he was angry. Verse 6 in chapter 5, he says, I was very angry when I heard the outcry and these words. I took counsel with myself and brought charges against the nobles and the officials. What I want you to see there is when you and I encounter something that kind of angers us or frustrates us, the first thing that is not necessarily to take counsel with myself. I'll be honest with you. I want to lash out. I want to get to the bottom of it. I want action. I want to do something. But we see here Nehemiah says, I took counsel with myself. As angry as he was, after spending money to get people out of slavery, after spending money that it wasn't his, the king's money, to rebuild this city and rebuild these walls, after lending money and lending food so that the people had something to eat, he hears about the leaders of this city taking their own people and selling them back into slavery. I mean, that would bring me to a pretty steady boil. And we can see it. We can feel the tension there as we read this, that he was angry. He was enraged. Yet he took the time to take counsel with himself, to kind of evaluate. And didn't change his action. He brought charges against the nobles and the officials. He came to him, and he essentially said, you're out of bounds, you're wrong. And not only that, he called a great assembly. So he didn't just go to them individually and say, listen, Steve, I'm pretty ticked off at you, and I really want to just kind of punch you in the face for doing this. But if you will agree to stop doing it, then we can move on. He didn't do that. He calls an assembly, all the people, and he brings charges on the leaders publicly. Now, this isn't something that we're really comfortable about doing in a local context. We're okay with it publicly, like major. Like if you don't like the president, or you don't like a senator, or you don't like somebody like that, or even a coach, we're fine criticizing them. We're fine about bringing them to a press conference and forcing them to answer questions in the assembly. We're okay with that. But when it comes to privately, like when it's closer to home, we get uncomfortable with that. But Nehemiah, he was wanting to nip this in the bud. It was unacceptable to him. Because he saw the leaders, instead of taking care of the people, he saw the leaders leveraging their relationships for their own personal gain. Now, I will tell you right now, my view of leadership is absolutely the opposite of what has been modeled for me many times in my life. Because what's modeled for us a lot of times is leadership to a level in which you don't have to do as much as you used to have to do. When I look at Scripture and I study Jesus and I look at the life that he lived, I see leadership as demonstrated through servanthood. And I'm doing my best to be that as a new pastor. I want to be a servant to you. I want to be a servant to my family. I want to be a servant to the people of this city, to anyone God puts in my path. I want to be a servant because I believe that that's where leadership begins. A true leader doesn't leverage relationships for his or her gain. A true leader leverages relationships for their gain. One of the guys I learned most from, one of the things he says that every leader needs to say to the people he or she leads is, how can I help? That's the most important thing that a leader can say. I mean, think about it, about your boss. Just put it in your perspective for a moment. Think about your boss. Your boss is going to come to you many times and is going to say, I need you to do this, and I need you to do that, and you need to do this, and you better do that. But what kind of dynamic would change in that relationship if on a regular basis, earnestly, you heard your boss say, how can I help? How can I be a servant to you? I believe that that's what Nehemiah saw leadership as. As a matter of fact, if you read the book of Nehemiah, you see that for the 12-year period that he was the governor over this area, he nor his men took what it was rightfully theirs in terms of the food allotment and the rations, those kind of things. And I think goes so far as to say the conditions that they lived in. They did not take what they were entitled to as the leaders of this area. And the reason he did that, the reason he withheld himself from those benefits, from those entitlements, is because he knew that the people needed more. He knew that if he took what was rightfully his, lawfully his, then the people he was in charge of were going to suffer for it. And that's what he was modeling. And when he found out that the people underneath him were leveraging their relationships for their gain, he was outraged. He was outraged. As a matter of fact, I believe it goes farther than just serving. I heard a message one time, and the series was called Climate Change. And the big question that was asked is going to be the big question that we ask ourselves today. The question was, what's it like to be on the other side of need? And this pastor used an illustration of water skiing. Everybody water ski? I'm not a big water skier. I enjoy it, but I don't do it a lot. Okay, there are two things to happen. I like tubing. It's a lot safer. But unless you have a driver that is determined to hurt you, that can be dangerous. Like some people that may be sitting at soundboards at this time. Last time I went tubing, I think he had a personal agenda. But there's two ways to look at water skiing. As the driver of a boat, and this is kind of the illustration. I'm just going to flesh it out for you guys. Think about yourself as the driver of the boat and the people that are in your life, whether it's family, friends, co-workers, whoever it is, neighbors even. They're the ones that are behind the boat skiing. The question is, are they enjoying themselves? Are they having fun? In the wake of your life, are they enjoying themselves? Or if you look back at the people that are in your life, are they smiling? Are they happy? Are they enjoying their time with you? Or are they drowning in your wake? I mean, there's two different ways to be behind a boat. And there's no in between. It's either you're having lots of fun or you're close to death. And I think that's kind of the similar way with us. When you walk into a room, does the climate of that room change? For good or for bad? I had some friends that I refer to as Eeyore. Anytime I'm around that person, they're just kind of like, oh, how are you? How are you doing today? I guess I'm all right. Oh. And that's, Anita and I was like, Eeyore's here. Because every time we're around them, they're just depressed, and they're depressing, and there's nothing good, and it could be sunshiny, there could be $1 million on their front porch. They would think, if somebody came and put $1 million on their front porch, they would say, well, great, I guess I gotta clean the porch now. And that's the kind of people they are. And so that's the question for you and I. Like, when we walk into a room, how is the climate? What happens? If you look at the people that you lead, that you interact with on a regular basis, are they enjoying being with you? Or are they suffering because of you? And that's what Nehemiah is looking at these leaders, and he's trying to help them understand. It is our job as leaders to help others, to lead and guide them toward Jesus, to lead and guide them toward happiness and enjoyment, even through difficult things. The book of Proverbs says it this way in chapter 12, verse 26. We're going to put this on the screen. It says, one who is righteous is a guide to his neighbor, but the way of the wicked leads them astray. I mean, it's one of two camps. There's no in between here. You're either guiding people toward God, or you're leading them astray. Nehemiah was working hard so that the people of Jerusalem were coming back to God. They had stronger faith in God. The leaders that were there were leveraging those relationships in themselves. And I don't know if you've ever tried to share Jesus with somebody who doesn't have a good opinion of you, but it doesn't go over well. That's what stops a lot of people from telling people about the gospel. I haven't lived a very good life. I haven't done what I should. That's why it's really harder. The harder thing to do is to go back to the people that you did spend high school, that you were in college with, people that knew you at a younger age. If you go to a high school reunion or something like that, it's difficult. Because they have a certain perception of who you are, who you were. And they can't really accept the new one. That might be happening for your families. Some of the people in your family, they don't understand why you are the way you are. What happened? You used to be different. Because the righteous guides his neighbor. The wicked lead them astray. So for Nehemiah, that was clear for them in this place. And so Nehemiah goes into a process of realignment. Last week we talked about when the plan kind of gets messed up, or when there's a bump in the road that we need to remember the Lord who is great and awesome. We need to remember, we need to revise the plan, we need to resume the work. Remember, revise, resume. And so Nehemiah remembers the Lord in counsel with himself. He revises the plan. He knows he's got to call the great assembly. He's got to call the nobles and the officials out, and then he resumes the work. He realigns them. He brings them back to a point of work. And actually the nobles and officials, they kind of repent of their actions. They give money back. They give properties back. They give food back. And they've taken it as payment. They let people out of their slavery situation. And they go back to work. And so what he does is a lot of times in our world, realignment or fixing a problem, we think it begins with a leader telling us what to do, explaining what happens, giving us a 4-point vision, casting whatever, here's what we're going to do, people. But I really believe it has more to do with what a leader does, his actions, not explanation. Because remember, according to Jesus, a leader is a servant. Not just a prophet, not just a teacher, not just a coach. And you know, this happens even now. This service, this Sunday, is our 5 months of gathering as a church. We started gathering as a church 5 months ago, kind of this weekend in the month in August. And I've had some conversations with other church planners. I've had some other conversations with some ministry leaders and that kind of thing. And the question they keep asking me is, you know, how's it going? What kind of conflict are you running into? What kind of frustrations are you experiencing as a church planner? And I think my stubbornness is a benefit to me at this point in the game, because I'm pretty convinced on what we need to do and when we need to do it, and I don't have a problem saying no. A lot of guys have a problem saying no to certain initiatives or certain ministry ideas. And so we have a clear vision statement, guide people in relationship with Jesus and each other. So if it doesn't fit in one of those two camps, we're just not going to do it. It's not this bad thing. We're just not going to do it. But even now, we've had to come back to the drawing board and say, well, what are we doing? Are we just gathering so that we can have a Sunday morning gathering of people? So that people have somewhere to go on Sunday morning to check off their church box? Are we just building a church so that I'll have some income? That I can feed my kids? No, it's far more than that. And I know that over the course of months and years as a church, we're going to have to keep coming back to the drawing board and say, listen, this is why we're doing this. Just like Nehemiah came to the nobles and the officials and said, we're not doing this so that you have position. We're not doing this so you have power, so you have wealth, so you have money. We're doing this for the glory of God. When the city of Jerusalem is complete and secure, then people will return to glorifying God through worship. That the surrounding areas would see the trust and the faith of the people of Jerusalem, and they would glorify God for what they saw. We as a church, GCC, we as the church in York County, we as the church around the globe, we're not doing this to make a great name for ourselves, but to bring glory to God. And not just for that, so that people who do not know Him would see Him as a true God and Savior. That's why we exist. So sometimes we're going to have to remind ourselves, we're going to have to realign. And that's why I put a lot of pressure on myself. Because as a support staff member in churches and as a member of a group of people in different organizations, or even in soccer, on soccer teams, I had this concept that so goes the leader, so goes the group. And I believe you can look at a person who's in charge and determine the success or the lack of success for future gain by just looking at the leader. And so when I think about that concept, and now that I'm the guy in charge, that's honestly quite terrifying. More terrifying for you than it is me. But I believe that. When you look at the story of Nehemiah, you look at a leader like Nehemiah, who's so committed to the vision, who's so committed to the glory of God, there was nothing going to stop him. That's why they were successful. That's why they were able to rebuild the wall. That's why he could call out the nobles and officials. Because he was a leader. He had moral authority. He had ultimate authority from the king that he was under. More importantly, he had the blessing of God, and he continued to go back to God. I took counsel with myself. That's essentially prayer, guys. When you rub up against those problems in life, when you rub up into those issues and those frustrations, those people, those groups, those circumstances, are you just responding? Are you taking counsel with yourself? Are you going to prayer? Are you going to the only person that can make a difference? Because we all know what it's like. We all know what it's like just to get along. Nehemiah could have done that. He could have just said, guys, just calm down. Just make it work. I say that to my kids a lot. Just figure it out. Right? Maybe you've had a boss that said that to you in a project or something like that. Just make it happen. Just make it work. I don't want to know the details. Just fix it. Just make it. Y'all get along. And we've experienced that, right? We get along for getting along's sake. That's not the best. Pete Wilson is a pastor in Nashville, Tennessee. He said it this way. He says, community without truth is artificial harmony. Community without truth is artificial harmony. You know, that boils down all the way to small group. I've been in some great small groups. I'm in a phenomenal small group right now. I was in some really, really bad small groups. I was in a married small group that the lead couple actually cheated on each other and got divorced. Not the best leadership paradigm there. But we all got along. Problem is we weren't truthful with each other. And that's what was going on here. The leaders, the nobles, the officials, they weren't being truthful. They were just making it happen, making it work. You see, here at GCC, and I'll tell you, if you're new and you're interested, or maybe you're here a couple of weeks and you're still not sure, maybe you've been here from the outset, maybe this is your 5th month being part of this church, I'll tell you right now, I'm not interested in counterfeit peace. I've been a part of it. For me, as a person, fake unity is far worse than conflict. I would rather sit down and argue for hours. I would rather you come and tell me all the things that are wrong, in your opinion, than for us just to pretend that we like each other. Because community without truth is artificial harmony. We are not about counterfeit peace here. We're about authentic community. Authentic community. Not happy community. Authentic. Sometimes we're not going to get along. And sometimes you're not going to agree. Sometimes I'm not going to agree. Well, what are we going to do about it? For Nehemiah, it was completely clear. It was not going to continue. We're going to fix this problem. But in order to fix the problem, in order to accomplish the goal, as a church, in order to accomplish the goal here in Jerusalem of rebuilding the wall, in order to accomplish the goal of building a family, of having community, of having friendships, of having an influence with the gospel, with the message of Jesus Christ in our community, we've got to be the first ones to ask the question, what kind of leader am I? In what way am I leading the people around me? I shared this yesterday morning with the guys at 7 that I had a moment with my children. That's what we call it, right? A moment. We had a good day. It was going fine. Kids were kind of belly aching about this or that and the other thing, and I just get along, right? And we were watching this new show called World's Funniest Fails. Anybody see that? There were moments of inappropriateness for my children, but it was Friday night, and we were just like, don't listen to that. But it was really funny, a bunch of videos where people are getting hurt on accident, and there's nothing funnier on planet Earth than somebody being surprised by pain. I don't know why that is, but it is. You see somebody get hit in the face and they didn't know it was coming, you would die laughing. It just is. Maybe babies laughing is funnier than that. I'm not sure. But babies falling off a couch, funniest ever. Okay? Not my babies, someone else's. Preferably that I don't know. But we're watching this show, and I don't even remember where the conversation went, but there was some kind of interaction between Anita and I that was, it wasn't an argument, I don't even remember what it was, but all of a sudden Mac, our 5-year-old son, he goes, guys, chill out. Wasn't the best thing for him to say, because that is not what I did. I think I've said this before, but when I lose it, when I blow my top, I don't know why, this is weird. The first thing I do is tell my children to clean. Like, that's it. I look, everything that is not clean and put away, all of a sudden it's glowing with red rage in my view. And so, I got out of my chair, I'm like, that's it! Get upstairs! Clean your room! Take all your stuff. You got 14 pairs of shoes in the living room. You can only wear one. Get them in your closet. Yeah, I lost it. It was terrible. It was terrible. It was one of those moments where I was immediately regretful. Like, I knew it. Like, as the words were coming to my mouth, like, you're an idiot. Don't say that. Don't say that. Don't say that. And so I went to each of my kids individually, kind of explained, tried to justify my actions. Wasn't able to do that. So just kind of explained why Daddy was upset. Sorry. It was a whole thing. And the reason I do that is not to have a clean conscience. I don't do that so that the next morning won't be uncomfortable, or so that I won't have to talk myself into back into good graces with my wife. I do that because I want my kids to know that leaders mess up, and that I care as a dad and as a leader of them. I care about what's going on in their hearts and in their minds. I want them to understand why things happen. But I also have to be the one willing to say, what's it like to be on the other side of me? Are my kids enjoying the wake of my life, or are they drowning in it? Are the people of this church enjoying being a part of this? Are they excited about GCC, or is it becoming a chore and an ordeal and a pain? Are the people you work with enjoying being around you? If you ever had an opportunity, an open door to tell someone about Jesus, would the climate around you make it more difficult or easier to tell them about the message of Jesus? You see, Nehemiah was a leader through sacrifice, through servant heart, through consistency. He modeled what he was expecting people to live. So what's that like for us? So the dare is this, the challenge, if you will. A couple of years ago, while we lived here in Rock Hill, one of my bosses came to me and just asked me what my deal was. What was with my attitude? And I didn't have a real good answer for him. I mean, there were some circumstances in my life that I wasn't excited about, but we all have that, right? I mean, I've been not excited about being 5'6" for many, many years now. I get over it. But he asked me that, and I'm like, why is your attitude like it is? And I didn't have a real clear answer. So I started to call people that I used to work with. And I started to call friends of mine and ask them this question: what's it like to be on the other side of me? As a matter of fact, I asked one of my friends that I worked with in Atlanta, because when I left that job, there was some celebration, and I asked him this question. It's a terrifying question to ask. I said, was there a sense of relief when I left that staff? Thankfully, he said, I wouldn't call it relief. It wasn't the answer you want. But I wouldn't call it relief. But there was a sense of, what's it like for the people in your life? If you're a parent, if you're a brother or a sister, if you're a husband or a wife, if you're a leader in work, if you're a leader in school, if there are people that you interact with on a regular basis, what's it like to be on the other side of you? It's difficult. It's a difficult question. It takes a lot of guts to ask. But I believe only when we start asking questions like that, when we start to experience authentic community, when we really experience what it's like to truly grow in our faith. When we're honest with ourselves, when we're honest with those around us, we experience We experience an authenticity that just there's no replacement for. So that's my challenge to you this week. People who are closest to you, who interact with you on a regular basis, ask them the question, what's it like to be on the other side of it? What are they doing in your wake? And then do something about it. Let's pray. Lord, we thank you so much for not giving up on us, for loving us in spite of our sin, our shame, our selfishness. Lord, we see you in the story of Nehemiah. We see you, Jesus, calling us out, the nobles and the officials who are leveraging relationships for our own personal gain. God, help us to have a repentant heart. Help us to use our influence, our friendships, our relationships to the benefit of those that we know and love. Let us be servants, God, in a way that you've been a servant to us. Let us be honest with ourselves and let us truly experience community the way you intended us to experience it. Jesus, thank you most for your sacrifice. We pray this in your name. Amen.